So this morning I made a pretty interesting little discovery. It had to do with some emotions that I had been feeling and just exploring and going into the origin of those feelings. And it basically came down to this. You know, well, first of all, I should probably preface this by saying that I believe that this discovery that I made probably explains the main issue that men have with women in general. I believe that this is the reason why men actually resent women in a large segment of the male population. So follow me on this because it sounds a little strange, but there's a commonality among many of us that were brought up in families where there's more than one child. Okay, so now this could be an impact even to those that were an only child, but I think it's more so with children that have siblings. And this is kind of how the scenario goes. And I'll give myself as an example. So I was born, and of course, I was the firstborn child. So there were no competing siblings. And basically, I had my mom's attention all to myself. So yeah, I mean, Dad's attention was there, but it was more in and out just because of the type of life that he led when I was a very young child, and he wasn't available to be with me as much as maybe it would have been good for me, but that's neither here nor there. I'm talking about the motherly attachment right now. So, of course, mothers nurse the child, so she, of course, brought me to her breasts and fed me and nurtured me and weaned me during my first few years of life, right? So basically, I was, crudely speaking, sucking on her boobs. And this was my source of food and my source of comfort and whatnot during my very early childhood, as it is with pretty much every baby, unless, of course, they're not breastfed, they're given just some kind of formula or something like that. But still, the mother holds the baby close, even if he or she doesn't feed off of his or her mother. But there's that attachment and the latching on to the breasts and all that kind of thing that the child typically goes through when feeding from the mother. Well, for me, just before I turned 3 years old, another baby showed up on the scene, my younger brother. So my mother bore another child, which was my brother, and lo and behold, he starts sucking on her boobs. Now, when I started thinking about this, really going into it, I was thinking, and I can't say that I have a visual memory of this instance that I can reflect back upon. I can't say that, oh yeah, I distinctly remember that my little brother started feeding off of my mom and then I wasn't anymore, and now she replaced me with him. That I can't say that I actually consciously was thinking that, or that I actually have any memory visually of that, okay? But I started going into the feelings of that. Because I can tell you in my relationships with females, with women as an adult, that there have been instances of jealousy, instances of insecurity, instances of feeling like I'm being replaced by somebody else. And as I started digging into this, into the concept of being weaned off of my mother's breasts, and my younger brother then being fed and being the coddled one and being the one getting mom's attention much more than I was, because by that time I was older, I was more mobile, and I was growing teeth and all that. So, of course, I wasn't breastfeeding anymore. But having seen my younger brother then feeding off of mom, which I wasn't doing anymore, I can imagine, and actually I had it was like a feeling memory. Like as soon as I started thinking that, I was thinking, that's that feeling. That's the feeling that I've had in my adult life when I felt like a woman was cheating on me, for example, or like I was feeling insecure and being replaced by somebody else in her life. And I realized that, holy shit, this goes all the way back to when I was about 3 years old. And the feeling that came up from when my brother was getting the attention from mom, getting that closeness, that physical embrace and the sucking on the boobs that I wasn't getting anymore. And it was such an interesting revelation because it gave context to these other feelings that I've had that are basically the same thing as I'm feeling I had back then, repeated over and over and over and over again, as if my unconscious is trying to tell me, Chris, you need to deal with this. And now I know where it's from, and I can deal with it. So look at this for yourself. Now, for guys, this is pretty, you can see what the impact is, right? Where a boy, a child, might feel resentment towards mom, but as a child, the child may not register that as resentment at all. They don't have a label or a context to put that in. But later on in life, this feeling of whatever it was that the child felt, seeing, those are my boobies, and now you can't take them. You know how little kids are. Think about it. Little kids are always saying, mine, and they grab the toy or whatever, right? Whatever it is they're attached to, a doll, mine. But imagine that at not even 3 years old, and then mom is giving what was feeding me to another kid. What would be going on emotionally within me? Mine! But I can't do anything about it because mom is already offering it to another child. I'm thinking this is a big part of sibling rivalry. It's why brothers fight with each other. And even, I imagine that sisters probably have a similar situation, only women tend to deal with things a little differently, right? With men, they can get aggressive and punch each other or yell at each other or chase each other around and be physical. Whereas with girls, they can tend to be just pouty or have this jealousy or underlying simmering feelings of resentment that they take it out maybe in some kind of passive aggressive way. Now, I'm not saying that boys can't do that as well, but there's probably different ways that males and females tend to deal with those issues just because of their biological makeup. But then there could be crossover in how that happens between the two sexes that is common even between them. So, but you can imagine if a younger sister is taking over what the older brother was having, and then there's that brother-sister competition, or then it could be a sister and a sister, and they, one viewing the younger one now getting fed, and she's not getting it anymore, and maybe how she would deal with that. But it just, this whole perspective coming to it was very fascinating for me, because it's like a mini trauma, and it isn't of course, it's not like overt trauma where a parent is deliberately trying to act in a way toward a child that's hurtful. Of course. I mean, this is just a natural byproduct of what happens in life, and the way that the child ends up interpreting it that makes the child feel resentment, jealousy, anger, insecurity. So anyway, just another little insight that might be useful to you to go into your past and really look at that and, ask yourself, wow, is there some feeling that I might have felt or that I do feel, and now that I go back and look at this, holy cow, that might have been where it came from for me too. That might help explain, if you're a boy, a man, why you have a resentment toward women, maybe a misogynistic attitude, or maybe just an anger that's underlying your attitude toward women. Or if you're a woman, maybe it's why you have anger toward men. Maybe you had a little brother that took over for you. Or maybe it's a jealousy toward other women, or some kind of envy or something like that because you had a younger sister. I don't know. There could be a range of different emotions that are associated with this attachment and detachment from mom, and then the potential of a younger sibling then taking that over, like all of a sudden it's the little one's territory, and you have to deal with that. And what you did to either suppress emotions or somehow had these emotions develop that probably are expressed in your adult life if you haven't gone into those feelings to really deal with them from their very start. Hopefully this is useful to you. Ciao.